So in this video, we're going to talk about how to solve linear equations, and we're going to just show and develop piece by piece what each step you could do. So starting with question 1, notice that you have x plus 6 equals 20. So we're going to do something called the addition principle, where what you do to one side, you must do to the other in terms of adding or subtracting. So you want to isolate your variable. So I usually say in the beginning, you circle your variable. I want to isolate that. So I'm going to minus 6 to both sides. Now notice your equal sign. That should always be like your column or your divider that you want to balance out the equation. So imagine if this is a weight, it's heavier on this side than it is on this side. So you want to bring terms over. So bring it over, we get x. This goes to 0. And then you do 20 minus 6, and that's 14. And that's your answer. You can always do a check. You don't always have to write it. You can do it in your head. But 14 plus 6, what is that equal to? Oh, it's equal to 20. So we check it. Okay, same thing here. Circle your variable. There's your equal sign. We want to balance it because there's 2 terms on this side, 1 term on here. So we're going to do the opposite sign. Add 9 to both sides. When you add 9 to this side, it goes to 0. X equals 7 plus 9. And 7 plus 9 is 16. Let's try another. Okay, fractions. No big difference, right? So we're going to subtract 2/5 to both sides. Bring down the y. This goes to 0. Equals. Now I want to combine these, but as we've seen, they have to have like denominators, and they don't. So the common denominator, 3 times 5, is 15. So I'm going to multiply this fraction by 5 over 5, and this fraction by 3 over 3. So this gives me 5 all over 15 minus 6 all over 15. So when you add or subtract like fractions, you keep the denominator, and then you do the operation with the numerator. So 5 minus 6 is a negative 1. And that's your answer. Okay, let's look at number 4. Here's my variable. I want to get it by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. I get x is equal to negative 50. Okay, same idea here. I'm dividing by 7, so the opposite operation of division is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 7. These cross out. I'm left with x is equal to 12 times 7, which is going to be 84. All right, let's take a look at 6. 6 deals with decimals. So we have 5.2x minus 3.4x. So why do I do that? Notice that even though I have an equation that has 2 terms on one side and 1 term on the other, I have 2 x's. I only want to have 1 x to isolate, so I have to combine them. So I look at the coefficients. 5.2 minus 3.4. You can use a calculator, or you could do it out like this. So 12 minus 4 is 8. 4 minus 3 is 1. So 1.8x is equal to 16.2. Now you divide by 1.8. And we get x is equal to 9. Let's try another. Alright, so we have 1/2 y. This is similar to before. You can think of this as y over 2 as well. You can also think of this, you're multiplying as 1/2 y, or you can think of this as dividing by 2. It's the same thing. So if I'm thinking of it as multiplying by 1/2, I could divide by 1/2. But you have to remember, when you divide by a fraction, it's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. And reciprocal is a fancy word for flip. So really, this whole thing is the same thing as doing 2 over 1 times the question, and then timesing 2 over 1 to both sides. Now notice what happens here. All of this goes to 1, so you're left with y. And then negative 18 times 2 is a negative 36. And that's your answer. Okay, let's try here. Same idea as number 6. you have like variables on one side of the equation, so we need to combine them first. The denominators are the same, thank goodness. So this becomes 3 minus 2, so 1 over 5a is equal to 100. I'm going to use the same technique I used here. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal or the flip. So these go to give me 1. I'm left with a is equal to 5 times 100, so that's 500. All right, now, variables are on two sides of the equation. I need to bring it over. So I can't just combine them as is. I have to change signs since I'm moving it to the other side of the equal sign. So 9x minus 6x is 3x equals 15. Divide by 3. X is 5. Again, feel free to pause this video at any time to rewind or slow down and re-look at the questions. All right, let's look at number 10. I have an x on the left side and an x on the right side of the equal sign, but I also have non-x terms on each side, so I have to bring them over by changing their signs. I'm going to minus 3x to both sides. I have 6x, one at a time, minus 7. Keep the equals. This goes to 0. Bring down the 21. Now I'm going to isolate the 6x, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. 6x, negative 7 plus 7, 0, equals 21 plus 7, 28. Divide by 6, so you can isolate your x. And this is not divisible, but 2 does go into both of them. So 28 over 6 is the same thing as 14 over 3. All right, now this question is different because there is a parentheses. Whenever you have a parentheses, you must get rid of it. How do you get rid of it? By distributing the number in front. Distributing means you take that number that's in front and you multiply it to each of the terms inside. So you take the number with its sign. So in this question, it'll be 27x. Minus 3 times x is 3x. And minus 3 times negative 6 is a positive 18. Equals 6. And now this looks like some of the questions we've worked with already. Here's your equal sign. These two are on the same side of the equal sign, so you keep them as is and you change and you just do the operation. So 27 minus 3 is 24x plus 18 equals 6. Now I still want to isolate the 24x, so I'm going to minus 18 to both sides. I have 24x is equal to negative 12. Divide by 24. X is negative 12 over 24. 12 goes into the both of them. Negative 1/2 is your answer. Now this question has two parentheses, so that just means you're going to take the number in front with its sign and distribute it just with the parentheses that it's paired with, and keeping the signs as your answers, and those become your plus and minus signs. So you have negative 9 times x gives you negative 9x. Negative 9 times 2 gives you minus 18. Positive 3 times x gives you 3x. Positive 3 times negative 2, minus 6. And then this whole right side just stays. So check this. Make sure you're comfortable with what just happened. Now you combine your like terms. You have a minus 9x and a plus 3x. So it's a minus 6x. You have a minus 18 and a minus 6, and that's a minus 24. Notice that I didn't change signs here, right? Because they're still on the same side of the equal sign. Equals 2x minus 18. Now I'm going to start changing signs. So I'm going to add the 6x to the other side. And I get negative 24 equals 8x minus 18. I'm going to isolate the 8x. I'm going to add 18 to the other side. I get negative 6 because negative 24 plus 18 is negative 6 equals 8x. I'm going to isolate the x, so I divide by 8. And so x is equal to negative 6 over 8. 2 goes into both of them, so negative 3/4 is your answer. All right, we've done a question like this already, right? So we said that when you have a fraction times a variable, you can divide by a fraction. But dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. And that'll give us 36 over 3, which gives us 12. However, we could have right away just taken the reciprocal and multiply both sides by it. And then that would have just given you your answer a little bit quicker, but they both give you the same answer. All right, so I'm going to show you a method here that I think will be really useful, and that in order to solve fractional equations, you can just eliminate the denominator. How do you do that? Step 1. Find your least common denominator. Even if it's just a common denominator, just find that. Number 2. Multiply both sides by the LCD. And so this means it's actually going to eliminate that fraction because you're going to divide into it. You're going to simplify and solve. So if you look at this question, your least common denominator, you have 3, 2, and 4. Your least common denominator is 12. So we're going to take 12 and multiply it to both sides. Now, if I multiply it to both sides, you also could just think of it that you have to place it with each term. That's the whole idea of distributive property. So I actually right away just go ahead and write it like this. So 12 times the 2/3 x, 12 times the 1/2, and 12 times the 3/4. So every single term gets multiplied by that LCD. Now watch what happens. 3 goes into 12 4 times. So you're left with 4 times 2x, and that's 8x. 2 goes into the 12 6 times, so you're left with plus 6. 4 goes into the 12 3 times, so you're left with 3 times 3, and that's 9. Oh my gosh, look how nice that is. The fractions are gone. So we subtract 6 to both sides, and we're left with 8x is equal to 3, and divide by 8, and x is 3/8. Again, pause this video, watch it again, make sure you're comfortable with this process. Okay, here's another example. Your least common denominator. You have 8, 2, and 4. 8 is your LCD, but if you picked a different number, it's still okay as long as it's divisible by 8, 2, and 4. So I'm going to take 8 and I'm going to times it by 3/8x minus 8 times 3/2 equals 8 times 1/4 x. Here we go. So now we're going to clean it up. 8 goes into 8 one time each, so you're left with just 3x. 2 goes into 8 4 times, so you're left with 4 times 3, and that's 12. And then 4 goes into 8 2 times, and you're left with 2 times 1x, and that's 2x. We're almost there. Let's minus the 3x to both sides. So we're left with a negative 12, keep the sign in front of it, and that's negative 1x, and divide by negative 1. So x is 12 is your answer.